All right, so it is Wednesday, October 5th, and here we are again. We have a great guest. We are all around the world today, visiting with you all, and we look forward to having a great time. And before we get rolling, let me ask our John Sibley Butler to play some music.
Where's my pal? Where's my friend? All good things must have an end. Sad things and nothing, and on they go. I guess he went to Mexico. They all went to Mexico. Buenos Dias, got to go. Tanaquil, Madison, de Carson. They all went to Mexico.
Brilliant, Johnny. Thank you very much. That's nice. A new one. That's a new one.
Yes, it is. How are you doing?
Yeah, today? I love it. How are things, John? Tell us.
Things are good.
Like the weather is getting nicer.
The weather's nice. Spending a lot of my time on the workforce, the future of the workforce. It looks like that America have a lot of initiatives from the National Science Foundation to talk about distributive work, to talk about the relationship between where you work and profits. Will it have an impact upon our competitiveness in the future? So the distributive workplace is certainly a reality. So in the midst of a war in Europe, in the midst of the stock market going up and down, but more importantly, in the midst of Americans with inflation, then we have an issue with people actually wanting to go back to work in the traditional form. So the National Science Foundation has put out, as you know, a directive to be studied. And of course, this was started long years ago, and it's very, very interesting. So, and I've been doing lots of startups. I think that the creative juices around the world are really, really going. And what's important about that is it's not the public money from the stock market, it's the private money. There's a lot of private equity firms that's stepping up to fund startups. So it's pretty interesting. But as we know, that's why we're here, to continually solve problems. I wish I were in Europe with my colleague, Llewellyn King, but I'm not there, but I'm glad that he's here and thinking about us.
All right. Llewellyn, how are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. I'm not up as late as poor Jemma. It's only just after 8 o'clock here, so it's not bad at all. I am splendid. I've come over to England to Britain to take a look at the election, also the horrendous energy problem, which seems almost without resolution, or that there will be no resolution in the short term. Sharing a shortage is not an easy thing to do. Its result is probably a mixture of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but also the failure of the several British governments to take remedial action when they saw the train heading towards the bumpers and did nothing about it. A tremendous confidence that solar and especially wind in Britain's case would fill the gap. They had a wind shortage last fall, which resulted in an early drawdown of what natural gas reserves they have. So everything was out of kilter, and the Ukrainian situation has just exacerbated. The going price for natural gas today is about 10 times its average over the previous 10 years, and it's likely to get more expensive as the winter wears on. It's going to be a very difficult winter in Europe, probably a little less so in the United Kingdom, but it's going to be very, very expensive. And this has caused the government to come up with an elaborate scheme to compensate people for the cost of the terrible cost of energy. And there are a lot of realignments in businesses. A lot of pubs, for example, are going out of business, which I think is very tragic. I mean, all that culture wiped away, John. It's going to be a difficult winter. This is sort of resignation. And there's a backstory, which nobody wants to mention, and that is Brexit, that the economy is weak because of the Brexit, the leaving Europe, which has been more contentious, more difficult, and more of a disjointed business than ever its advocates admitted. So Britain is in a lot of trouble going into this winter, and probably will be for a year or 2 years. One is reminded that in the terrible winter of 1944, 1945 in Holland, it was called hunger winter. But in some parts of Europe this winter, it may also be hunger winter. Certainly, when it comes to warmth, to energy of all sorts, it will be a hunger winter for most of Europe.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Jemma, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're delighted that you're with us, and we are looking forward to spending time with you. For those of you that don't know you, I do want to take the time to introduce you formally. And so obviously you are co-founder and executive chairman of PowerLedger, and are going to be with us for a while, and we look forward to that. And to PowerLedger, and you'll explain it better than me, but as I read from your bio, it's a company that uses blockchain for energy and environmentally commodity trading, and hopefully, all about sustainability, ESG, and decarbonization, and how to get there. Your career has been very interesting, on how you become probably a thought leader and a beacon of sustainability and corporate social responsibility in your journey. And we appreciate that, which that journey, I believe, started with JP Morgan in London. And then she ended up becoming a research fellow at Curtin University and a deputy Lord Mayor of Perth. And you have had the chance or the opportunity to set up Australia's first fossil fuel-free pension fund, which I find fascinating. Love to talk about that. And has sat on numerous boards championing sustainable businesses. Since 2016, you co-founded PowerLedger, which won the Sir Richard Branson's Extreme Tech Challenge. We'd love to know about that, how you got that. And then in 2018, you made the ENY FinTech Entrepreneur of the Year. You are a doctor in many things. And you have you got a degree in bachelor's in commerce and finance from Murdoch University, a master's in sustainability leadership from the University of Cambridge, which Llewellyn would approve, and a PhD in sustainability from Curtin University, and you have several other certificates from Cambridge. Welcome to the show, Jemma.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So to get rolling, I'm curious. I usually ask two things to a guest. I want to hear the impact of COVID and how COVID has accelerated or changed, or what things have done to your business. And then I'm also curious, with September 2022 has been an interesting, difficult year. What's your outlook for the closing of 2022, perhaps what 2023 looks like for your company?
COVID in Western Australia, where we're based, really made us think very differently about our business. I don't know if you tracked much how the Australian government dealt with COVID, but it was quite hardline, and particularly Western Australia. There were commentators that were, comparing it to North Korea in terms of the position that had taken, and what that actually meant practically was we couldn't bring people in or out, and the labour markets in Western Australia were really tight because the iron ore price was high, and we have a lot of iron ore production here, a lot of gas production. It's quite similar to Texas in many respects, and that made it really hard to grow the business here. So what ended up happening is we had, I think, 5 or 6 people sponsored by the federal government with visas, but we couldn't get them into the state at all. And so we started looking at hiring personnel outside of Australia and changing the operating model of the business, which we've been continued to implement in the kind of post sort of COVID emergency era. And I would say COVID was a catalyst for things that were ripe for change. It's now seeing what we see, doing what we're doing with a more hybrid distributed model, operating model. I think it's actually much better for the business, and it brought forward a decision that we would probably have made later on. And so we're now setting up more workforce in Europe, in Asia, in India, and I think that means that we can service markets, in more favorable time zones, and also get talent from markets where there's greater pools of talent than perhaps there would be in the Australian market. So we're retaining our presence in Perth, but the growth of the business is happening outside of Australia.
Brilliant, brilliant. Tell us real quick, Jemma, to dive into your world. Where did PowerLedger come from? How did this come about? What is the company doing today? Any new products?
We set up the business 6 years ago. After I returned to Australia from living in London, I was there for 11 years. I did a PhD in electricity market disruption and designed a solar and battery system for some condos here in Perth as a part of an eco village. And I was trying to find software that would allow the trading of electricity within the apartment building, and I couldn't find anything that did that. And by chance, a former banking colleague of mine introduced me to my now business partner, John Bullich, and he's pioneered technology and blockchain for many decades in the tech space, and had been working in blockchain for several years before I met him in 2016. And I explained he was developing blockchain solutions for other sectors, and I said, could it do anything in energy? I'm a bit stuck with my doctoral research. Could it do something with this project? And we began to look together and saw huge opportunities for tracking the granular kilowatt hours, time, place, the provenance of energy, and also tokenization of attribute certificates like carbon credits and renewable energy certificates, and to facilitate the trading and settlement of those. So using blockchain as a supporting technology. We got really excited and set up the business a few months later. So it was, and I just had my first child about 7 weeks earlier. So it wasn't really on my radar to set up a company, holding a newborn baby. But these things happen in life, babies and businesses. And since then I've had 2 more children, and we now have about 20 clients in 10 countries, and our clients are utilities and large corporates. On the large corporate side, it's companies that have made commitments to renewable energy, and they want to get more granular around tracking exactly where they're at on their journey. And we've just launched in the US a certificate trading marketplace. We've integrated with the Midwest Renewable Energy Tracking System, MRETS. So using our platform, which is called TraceX, companies can buy and sell and settle physically and financially settle RECs on our platform, and the RECs move from the seller's wallet to the buyer's wallet on the registry.
Brilliant, brilliant, guys.
Brilliant. I am intrigued by your company for a number of reasons here in Austin, where IBM helped to really set the tone for blockchain. It's very, very interesting how people are utilizing it. And as I'm basically a statistician, so I look at it as a lot of nodes, and the blockchain is attached to the nodes. And that means that the data itself, is transparent. Everybody can see it, quote unquote. My question is this: as we move into blockchain, and as more people adopt blockchain, and as I say it, it's decentralized. It's not just one computer. It's billions and millions of computers. Is there any concern, or have you heard any concern from your market about the transparency, about the sharing of stuff on blockchain? Because it's like playing cards and everybody can see what everybody else has. So that's my first question. And my second question is, I guess in the blockchain, as we used to discuss it, is that whoever owned the data in the blockchain, the most data on the blockchain. So my first question relates to, hey, any concerns about transparency and the losing of information,
Privacy.
privacy? Yes.
Yeah, thanks for your question. In terms of privacy, I mean, there's different types of blockchain. So you can have an entirely public chain where the data is public. And so to maintain privacy, you might have to encrypt data and not store all data or only store encrypted data on the public chain. But there are other types of blockchains such as private consortium chains. And again, there are, nodes on the chain can see the data, but they might be, for example, market participants, and that might be something that for which it's not so sensitive. But there are ways to, encrypt data or put certain, cut the heads off data so that it's not identifiable. But that certainly is a concern, with the use of blockchains, and you need to come up with a way to kind of mitigate and manage any risks around sort of privacy and exposing customer data or even just commercial in confidence information.
So when you encrypt it, it's no longer blockchain, right? So therefore it becomes just a system of the movement and the storage of data rather than the blockchain itself.
Sorry, Johnny, could you just say the first bit of your question?
Yes, I said when you encrypt the data, then it's no longer blockchain. It's simply.
Oh, no, because you can put encrypted data on a blockchain.
Yes, but the whole notion is for everybody to see the hands of the card. So therefore it becomes another way of storing data and interacting on the nodes, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I entirely agree with that assessment. So it could be that you're putting hash data or encrypted data on the blockchain, and that the people that need to access that data are able to de-encrypt it and validate the data. Okay. Yeah. So there are some cases, where the intention is that, there's full transparency without that, but I wouldn't say in all cases. And for those stakeholders that need to get access to it, they would have, the ability to see the underlying data, not just the encrypted version.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jenna, this is very interesting. When blockchain first sort of burst on the scene or became generally visible, that people became aware of it, utilities in the US were tremendously enthusiastic about it. And then, as with many things, the enthusiasm dwindled somewhat. It became another tool. It was not revolutionary. And in fact, I've been to maybe 12 major utility meetings in the last 2 years, and blockchain has not been mentioned at one of them, which is interesting after this initial enthusiasm. So very interesting to learn what you are doing with it. I wonder, how do you work in so many different countries? I mean, obviously, things are very different in Thailand and France, for example. What are the commonalities you find?
Yeah, so in terms of why do you need a blockchain and is it revolutionary? That your first question. There was around 2017 and 2018, there were companies that were putting the word blockchain at the front of their name, and their stock price was going up, several 100%. And there was, euphoria and, a lot of irrational exuberance around blockchain. And we saw this happening and with some dismay. And, when the new sector starts and there's, people are saying, well, oh, you're hungry. Oh, you need a blockchain. This kind of level of, thinking that blockchains are the panacea and are going to solve everything. Whereas we see it quite differently. I think, blockchains are a little bit like barcodes in supermarkets. It's not like you go to the supermarket because it's got barcodes. Llewellyn's not going to go, I'm going to this supermarket because of the barcodes. But the fact that the barcodes exist there means that when you go there, the stock control is good. The product that you want is there. When you go through the till, there's less mistakes, it's fast. Whereas if you go to a corner store that doesn't have barcodes, they're perfectly valid and they function, but they're just not a supermarket. And I think, but blockchain is a little bit like that. It sits in the background of a system and makes it function more efficiently. But you can do it all, not all, nearly all, I would say, not all, without a blockchain. You can't do tokenization and financial and physical settlement as one entry on a ledger, which I think does differentiate in terms of attribute certificate trading, but by and large, you can do pretty much all of it without a blockchain. But what it does is allows for transparency and trust to be built in new markets. And when we think about energy, for a century, it was, coal, gas, nuclear, and no one really cared about the type of energy. It was just plain old energy. But now we've added renewables into the system, and now we're starting to get even more specific. Like companies want to be able to say, I got solar from this farm or wind from that farm. And the project that we're doing in France is working with a retailer there called Equateur, and they're offering their customers the ability to choose their energy mix. So customers can specify, I want 10% solar from this farm. I want 15% wind from that farm, up to 70% of their total energy consumption they can specify. And if you are going to be able to make claims about I'm getting energy from this, you need a way to count that, and you want to be able to trust and rely on it. So trust, I think, is very important in this new energy paradigm. And what I think blockchain provides is it improves the trustworthiness. And we've all seen situations with, greenwash, where companies are making claims that are not true. And I think to have more trust in the system means that people are more likely to participate in it, which is essential to actually, hasten the energy transition. And then to answer your question about how is it dealing with lots of different countries, well, it's very different. Like energy is complex, and it's complex in different places because the energy markets are different. And then you've got, regulatory settings and cultural settings as well. So there's a lot to take in. But in the case of places like Thailand, we have a partner there called BCPG, who are a listed entity. They have about 600 megawatts in their portfolio of energy. And so they are like our local interpreter of all of those things happening in the market. But in order for us to do business in places like, France or Austria or India, we do need to spend time understanding those markets deeply, because clients can find a local company that, they might prefer to deal with because it's easier. So you've got a high bar that you've got to operate to build that trust with the client, such that they're going to go, well, we're going to give it a go with this Australian company. And I think building relationships is something that you have to invest in. And, that's something I think that we've really prioritized and made important, and part of the reason why we've had the success that we've had to date.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Also, let me just say this, Andre. I also think that when we started the electronic marketplace, trust was one of the major issues. Security and trust. And the theoretical problem was, how do you gain trust, in this kind of electronic marketplace? I think blockchain was the first that laid everything out on all the hands on all the cards on the table. Okay. So for the first time, you can see what enterprises are doing. Like you said, with that trust come balancing the trust with the privacy. And of course, that's true for cell phones. That's true for a lot of things that we do these days. So I think that your client base will see the trust as being very, very important, and maybe overriding a lot of these security concerns as we move forward in this electronic marketplace.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Jemma, I've been to your country a gazillion times, love it. Also to the little island just east of it, love it. Texas, I recall when Texas was trying to define its deregulated strategy in 1997. We visited Australia, and we visited England, and we visited all kinds of places to create the deregulated market. And in many ways, the market in Australia and Texas looks fairly similar, except for who owns the meter. And Australia has been in a journey of incredible, transformation in many sectors. What would you say is the state of the land in terms of energy, on the decoupling of energy from enabling the roaming of energy, peer-to-peer transactions? What does it look like? What's your prediction 2 years from now, 5 years from now in Australia?
Well, I mean, in Texas and in the UK and in the east coast of Australia, they're the three places where there's been an energy crisis. And they're actually all three energy only markets. Now, I don't say that to advocate capacity markets at all, but I think that energy market, and the price settings, at least on the east coast in Australia, were predicated on, sustained low volatility prices, and that is a function of energy market that's one directional, large generators bringing electricity to customers. And in Texas, you've got a lot more renewables in the system. I know that the issues with the Texas grid were driven by weather events, cold weather events that really precipitated it. But if you look back, there had been energy crisis in Texas earlier, and there was a decision made not to put more interconnectors in to the system to bolster it. And I think that Australia also is an island. The UK is an island, so there's a lack of interconnectors in the face of a new sort of dynamic in the energy system, which is bidirectional. We're moving from a model of a few suppliers supply everyone to everyone supplies everyone, and the grid, the physical infrastructure, is breaking. There's issues with voltage, reactive power. Market operators are having to curtail output of renewables because there's oversupply at certain times of the day. And we deployed all this renewable energy in America, in Australia, in Europe, and elsewhere via feed-in tariffs, which was a blunt price signal that encouraged, pretty much like building, renewables anywhere without really consideration of this bigger issue. And you're starting to see the consequences of that. So in countries and places that have a high penetration of variable renewable energy, they have high electricity costs. And that is an uncomfortable truth for the renewables industry, that people they like to talk about the levelized cost of energy for from solar and wind, but don't look at the total system cost because of not renewables, but centralized planning of renewables that didn't really take account of time and place. And so now I think we're starting to see price signals and regulatory change, which is attending to pricing at time and place. So in Europe, the Clean Energy Package, which was a directive from 2018, requires all the member states, 27 member states, to implement local energy sharing laws by the end of this year, and the creation of what's called energy communities. So that's where, say, schools could set up and be an energy supplier, and the mums and dads can buy energy from the school and also trade energy with each other. And then in India, we did a project in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest and most populous state in India. It has 225 million people, and they didn't have a directive like the EU to foreshadow, regulatory reform. But what we did with them was a small demonstration project for peer-to-peer trading. And off the back of that, they said, this is great because we could scale renewables in the state without the subsidies of the feed-in tariffs. And they issued a regulatory decree allowing blockchain-powered peer-to-peer trading in the state. And so there's this kind of leapfrogging that we're seeing in in emerging economies that might actually mean that they start to develop these new conceptions of energy faster than high-income OECD countries. But now we've got that kind of pressure of like net zero, where governments are trying to get even more renewables in the system. And the crisis that Llewellyn mentioned, at the beginning, and this kind of decision that people are going to have to make between, heating and eating is a function of these systems that really haven't been upgraded and at the market level and the network level to cope with all of that. And, there were many junctures where it could have happened earlier, as Llewellyn alluded to, that those opportunities weren't taken, because I don't think there was really full recognition that, renewable energy, variable renewable energy doesn't behave in the same way as, dispatchable energy. And so there's a reckoning, I think, that's happening now, which is, a very difficult situation to deal with.
Yes, Doctor, in a lot of ways, what you've just said is that because of the centralization of things, why are people making decisions? In the airways, we have computers making decisions. In my automobile, computers are making decisions. At the internet level with computers and marketing, there are no people involved. So what I just heard you say was that we're so behind in the technology that would allow for the algorithms to make the decisions, for the algorithm to tell us what to bring online and what not to bring online. So my question is one that I always ask. In this worldwide system of energy, why are people still pulling levers? Just as we would ask, if I were to fly from Europe to America, I could get on an airplane and the airplane know exactly where to go. So when we get to a situation where we forget about the laws and et cetera, but how do you take the centralized planning and give it to the algorithms so that we can all have great energy and the algorithms know when to bring it online, know when to keep it, and raise the prices as need or not be?
Well, we actually have a solution that does exactly that, called local energy markets, or LEMs. And that is peer-to-peer trading that involves solar and batteries that provides a network service. So say, for example, there's congestion at a substation, rather than curtail that, the network operator can, or upgrade the substation, which could be very expensive. The network operator can allow the local energy market to relieve those points of congestion. And how it works is algorithmically. Households with solar and batteries systems talk to each other to store surplus solar in a battery, dispatch it to manage those particular issues. And we have our first projects doing that in Australia coming online shortly. But there are demonstration projects in Europe that are, showing how that can occur very effectively and defer network augmentation. But in terms of, your overarching point about why isn't this here? When are we going to get this? Who's going to make all these automated decisions? There's a couple of points. You've got, firstly, a regulatory framework that allows that to arise. The second is you need then offerings that does actually make humans behave in a particular way, which is buy a solar system, buy a battery, buy an EV, and then configure it to participate in that. And why would they want to do that? Well, it's going to make the payback period on their investment faster. It's going to drive down their electricity bills. So that's got to be understandable at the customer level. And we're starting to see that kind of packaging begin to happen. But most solar and battery systems are sold around, your own self-consumption and perhaps a feed-in tariff. They're the two levers that, you're going to get money or offset to pay it back. But a local energy market means you can start storing other people's energy, selling it to other people, and that provides another revenue stream and providing a network service. And so these are new concepts, and you do need it to be automated for people to participate in it. Then it does need to be set and forget. Otherwise, most, maybe 2% of the population wants to gamify it and do it each day, but mostly they want to understand it to make a good decision up front, but then they want it to be automated. And so I think retailers are now, energy suppliers are cottoning on to the need to not, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. People want to understand it, but they don't want to be bombarded by it. So you've got to get the mix right and simplify it in a way that they can see what's going on. And that, I think, is a real challenge for energy suppliers, because they've historically, just sent a very, flat bill, and now they've got to find new ways to engage their customers at the purchasing level and then day to day, so that they feel like they're getting value out of what they're doing.
Yes, I understand. It's much like I did all of my regression equation in graduate school on my knees by hand. Now my graduate students just point and click and don't know where it comes from. And we always like to say, hey, we need to know where the standard deviation, what it is, where it comes from, where is it on the normal curve. And I think that people need to get adjusted to, flying an airplane without a pilot, or being in a car without a person. You're exactly right. It's all about bringing all of those public-private together and making money, right? Thank you.
Jemma, I'm have been interested for many years in value added for utilities. And I ran some conferences and did a lot of reporting. And all we came up with was the only value that people wanted additionally from their utility was green energy. The problem at the time was there was no way of identifying it. It became fungible once it entered the grid. So it became sort of a trust game, and there was no blockchain. How do you nowadays identify the commodity once it has left the generator? And does it matter? So long as you know the aggregate amount of electricity and how it was generated.
Well, and that's what certificates, serve to provide. So 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy can originate a renewable energy certificate, and then that can be separated from the energy. So, the energy goes into the system, as you said, Llewellyn, and it becomes plain old energy, indistinguishable. But then the generator has a certificate that they can sell to the off-taker or separately. And that is largely how companies have been able to legally and validly say we're at 100% renewable energy. They could just be buying energy from the grid and buying certificates separately and acquitting those or retiring them against the volume of energy they're consuming annually. And that has been the practice, in corporations around the world. But what I think we've seen is that, companies, say, for example, have been operating in New York, but buying cheap certificates in Texas, which is causing overbuild of renewables in Texas, and no change to the energy system in New York. I'm just making up this example, but large companies have begun to see that their well-made plans around renewables and sustainability are actually breaking the grid. And so some corporate sustainability leaders are now saying we want to do 24/7 carbon-free energy, which is effectively hourly matching instead of annual matching of energy. So if they are in New York on a Wednesday in January, they want to buy a certificate that was created in New York on a Wednesday in January. And so what that means is they're going to be purchasing certificates or a power purchase agreement from a new generator that needs to come online, and that their buying will underpin or underwrite the financing for that new project to get out of the ground. So Google and Microsoft and Iron Mountain and others are now looking at this new gold standard, I would say, to really support the energy transition, encourage the growth of renewables, not just cheap procurement of certificates to cover annual volumes. And certificate buying, I think, is getting an upgrade. But to answer your question, it's the true certificates that most companies are able to be able to understand, am I getting renewable energy, albeit from a different time or place? But the emphasis on time and place, I think, is becoming greater now as we've got to, double-digit amounts of renewable energy in a lot of systems.
Our problem with renewable energy in much of the United States is that the place it's generated is not the place it is needed, and it's a physical problem of transmission.
Yes.
This is even in Texas itself, this is true, where you have a lot of wind resources, a very large state in some places, and you don't have the transmission to get it to other places. Your company deals only in renewables and only in renewables, and how do you define the renewables?
Well, I wouldn't say we deal only with renewables, because to count renewables, you have to count all of the energy. So, for example, Equateur is getting like renewable energy and purchasing energy from the grid, and then adding certificates to it, which is energy derived from other non-renewable sources. So in the case of France, it's often the case that it's nuclear. It can also be gas. So I wouldn't say that we deal exclusively with renewables. We deal predominantly with renewable energy. And for retailers, they want to start offering new products and services to their customers. So we can provide a feed to their system, and they may be only providing a certain amount of renewable energy itself, and then supplementing with certificates. So our system can provide insights around whatever the source of energy is, and when it was generated, where it was generated, the type, time, and place.
Well, how do you move into countries? If you're in, I don't know, I think you said 10 countries, and they seem to be looking at your website, very diverse countries. Do they come to you? Do they say we have a need? Or do you go to them with a sales force and say, you have a need?
It's tended to be where people have heard about us in companies, and there's some kind of pioneer going like that really is trying to push the boundaries with the energy system. If you think about Thomas Kuhn and his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, that he wrote in 1963, he's the guy that came up with the phrase, the paradigm. So when we say paradigm shift, we're referring to Kuhn, and he explained that revolutions don't just happen overnight, and they don't happen in the core of a system. What happens is they happen around the periphery of a system, and they work their way into the core. And I think that's what I see very visibly in the work that we're doing. In different places, different companies have decided to take a leadership position, and they're looking for solutions that can support them in fulfilling on what's important to them and what they've committed to. And so it's been a little bit what you would call organic in terms of how our clients have found us. But I would say that was really the first sort of 5 years of the business. But probably in the past 1 or 2 years, we can start to see through the regulatory lens and understanding markets more deeply where the focus will be for us in terms of scale. And I'd say Europe is very important because of the clean energy package, and India is very important because of the agility of that market. And from certificates perspective, the US is a big focus because there's a lot of renewable energy targets and big companies that are purchasing renewable energy certificates there. So I would say it was more organic, and now I would say it's more targeted as we move on, and we can start to see the traction and scale in the markets that are maturing faster.
Thank you.
Jemma, I want to give you a use case. It's my favorite use case, and I want you to use your products and explain your products in the different supply chain actors on how these use case could come to reality. So you probably know Ford is selling a car called the F-150 Lightning. I'm buying one. And my use case is I'm going to charge it at the university for free. Then I'm going to drive it home, and I'm going to run my house from it. Not only hoping to run my house, but I want to sell energy to anybody else from it. So imagine now 22 million cars in Texas that are currently registered transition to that F-150. They will need to charge, they would need enough energy to charge at the same time, which is not going to happen. We'll schedule them. But, let's imagine it's 100 kilowatt hours times 22 million. That's 2,200 gigawatt hours. And ERCOT is only an 80 gigawatt hour region. That would mean that the edge of the grid would have the ability to control the whole thing, and it would be a new dawn. So am I talking to the person who has come up with the products that can make this happen for real? Walk me through it.
Well, thank you for the thought experiment. I mean, I would just challenge one thing you said is that they're all going to charge at the same time.
No,
Because-
they're not. We know they're not going to charge
No,
at the same
no.
time.
I mean, they can't because of the, the limits that you just outlined. And they're unlikely to, notwithstanding that, because, they've all got that, that vehicle's got a very large battery, long range, will go for some time. So, the charging of this will be coordinated algorithmically so that the system can both handle it and derive the maximum benefit from that as well. And you
So
talked
which PowerLedger product needs to be deployed where, and how does this come to bear?
Yeah, so that is local energy market. So this is peer-to-peer trading that involves EVs, that involves household batteries, that involves solar systems. And so we partner with network operators and energy retailers or suppliers. So your supplier would allow you to participate in the LEM, the local energy market, and you'll be able to trade energy in the LEM with other customers of that retailer or other retailers' customers. And that the network would need services and also offer discounts to network tariffs, which would effectively change the yield for you as well. So you've got trading with other peers and then service provision offerings from the network as well. And that's all local energy market. So our client in that case is the retailer and the network operator, and you would be a customer of the retailer or the supplier. And we're actually doing a project doing that, as I mentioned, in Australia, in New South Wales. So we'd love to have you come out and look at that and see. And then I don't know if you've put in your order yet for your F-150, but you should probably do that soon.
I did. And Llewellyn has been telling me that it's not going to happen, and now he knows it is.
Oh,
Everybody
well-
I know, half the people I know say they put in orders for a vehicle they've never seen. That is magical thinking. Wait till it arrives. I think Toyota will get to the marketplace faster with something slightly better.
Oh, wow.
well,
think it's an
we can
F1
argue on the best
F1.
brand, but when the horse and cart existed, people were putting orders in for a Ford and without having seen it. So it wouldn't be, and the iPhone or the iPod, it's not the first time I'd say that that's happened.
Maybe it's interesting. No, it's there is a huge built-up demand, and the 150 becomes a symbol of the first electric vehicle, which will be classless. Periodically, you get a vehicle that is classless, that does not. The Morris Minor, the Volkswagen Beetle, these were classless cars, and so far, electric cars have all been stamped as something vaguely elitist, superior,
Elite.
morally superior, signaling moral superiority, perhaps. And the F-150, which presumably will be used by contractors and working people, breaks down that barrier, which is very significant, very important. And I think it's quite seminal, actually, despite the fact that Andres is never going to see his.
Hey, Johnny,
I don't want one if the masses can buy it.
Johnny, one comment to me.
Johnny.
Let's
mean-
be
Johnny.
perfectly clear on that point.
But what Llewellyn's pointing to is, when a new product comes online, you've got early adopters and the early majority, and then you've got the majority. And in the case of electric vehicles, the battery is about a third of the cost.
Yeah.
And to reach parity with a petrol car, it's about 2023, 2024, where EVs reach parity with petrol cars, and that's considered by many, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, for example, to be the point of liftoff for sales and for the mass market, which is what we're talking about here. And a great blue ocean strategy is really, how do you capture a product that is fantastic but also got mainstream appeal to a wide audience?
Yeah, well, what's apparent here is that we are in not a Schumpeter revolution, but as you said,
Schumpeter, yeah.
we're not
It
in the
is, I do
Schumpeter
think
revolution. Pardon?
I think it is Schumpeter
You
because
think so? I think it's
Schumpeter,
more the structure of scientific revolutions than and the paradigm change than Schumpeter. Because the reason why I say that is these two PhDs to talk theory is that you have a public-private partnership. So with computers, I could just introduce a whole nother computer and wipe out everything, and that's it. But you can't wipe the grid out because you've got to change it while it's flying, 50,000 feet. So I
yeah.
think we're more into the structure, Kuhn's, the structure of scientific revolutions, where the ideas of the science, and we change the paradigm from petrol cars. I like that. That's a good English thing, from petrol cars to electric cars. And I think that'd be a big paradigm change, just as we went from to cell phones, from landline phones. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a paradigm shift that's happening. We are changing the energy system. But I would say there's a role for Schumpeter, because Schumpeter talks about entrepreneurs hastening things and changing things in a way that isn't predictable by the system. Like you might have, a certain pace and rate of change otherwise, but entrepreneurs innovate and create these new categories of products and drive things forward. And I think that is very Schumpeterian.
Yes, I think so too. But because his creative destruction was just that. Because the purpose of the enterprise, of course, is to have enough capital to survive the next innovation. So if you misuse your profit, which is not profit in the traditional sense of the word, the use of profit is to buy the new technologies for the next generation so that jobs can be preserved. So I think we're there, but obviously it's a lot of opportunities going on. There's a lot of change in the marketplace. And quite frankly, we don't know where it's going, quite frankly. The state of Texas, TxDOT, for example, will put charges every, 50 miles in an interesting kind of way, anticipating that everybody will switch to electric cars. I think it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs, a great opportunity for your sector, because quite frankly, the new technologies will evolve, and a lot will be in the biosphere. I think that blockchain will be replaced soon with the biology, with the biosphere and the technology and biology. So it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
I think there are two things that you've got to allow for being sideswiped by either technology or by a resource change. I remember when it was not considered that there were any hydrocarbons in the Southern Hemisphere. And Australia is now a major gas producer, as is oil and gas off the shore of South America. The other one is sometimes it's just a better idea that wipes out everything. In 1969, I think it was, we got a man on the moon, which was fantastic. But in 1970, we put wheels on luggage, which was real progress.
We also got Tang and computers from the man on the moon. How about that? Yes.
Well, we didn't quite, but it certainly accelerated it.
Yes.
As did nuclear weapons development. In fact, just all nuclear development required much better computer skills. I read a paper once by Edward Teller, which said he could go no further without better computing machines. It was written in 1955. Better computing machines. The pressure was there for better computers, and they evolved and evolved and evolved.
Yes.
Jemma, real quick, we're coming here to an end. I want to know a couple of things. So are there any, or have you thought of any, or are you all experimenting with many potential new business models? Is the utility of the future a broken business model that needs to emerge from the past? Is the current model completely the new utility of the future, be the largest building in the corner that exports energy to everybody?
Well, I think that, talking about, the future is a hazardous business. And I remember going to see Back to the Future with my dad when it came out in the 80s. And it was a classic film with Michael J. Fox, which gave us a look into the future as it appeared to everyone in the 80s and 90s. So that's like, 30 years ago now. And, Back to the Future certainly had a clue to the future, but it's also interesting what they couldn't see. And if you remember, they had hoverboards, which aren't that far from drones, but they never recognized that televisions were going to go flat screen. And you won't see anything resembling an iPhone in there at all. So in terms of the what's happening in right now, I think because of like COVID monetary policy, we've seen a lot of money printing happening, and markets are starting to break. We've seen in the UK this week pension funds that had borrowed heavily to buy gilts. The markets around those were going to go bust. So the UK government had to step in and buy back its own bonds. And if you think about what happened in 2008 and 2000 and in the early 80s, this kind of contagion situation spread. So I think companies that have strong balance sheets are going to do well in this, but we're already seeing it's predicted that as much as half of the energy suppliers in Australia will go bust by the end of this year, and many already have, and this is happening in other places too. So capital markets and the formation of capital is going to be very important in terms of how that transition plays out and what will be, who the winners and losers will be. And that is going to be very interesting, this other sort of macroeconomic element.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Give us, Jenna, on your parting thoughts here. What's in front of PowerLedger in the next 6 months? What is coming? What accomplishments? Anything new that you can share? Any new products that are coming, or deals, or what's on your plate?
Well, we're doing this local energy market in Australia. It would be fabulous to do one in Texas. But in the US, the focus is on TraceX for trading renewable energy certificates and tracing energy for large companies. I think that's going to be a real theme. So there's about 360 companies that are RE100s, or companies that are committed to be 100% renewable. And I think we're going to see a large cohort of those start to focus on 24/7 carbon-free energy as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. Gentlemen, any final thoughts?
I think that it is a very interesting enterprise. I think blockchain is at its very infancy, and I think it will become a great tool in the future. And as I said before, because of the trust factor. And I also think that we're in the wild, wild west, as we would say in Texas, with entrepreneurs coming on almost daily in this shop. I'm looking at a lot of stuff with plugins that would be brought from China, for example. A lot of companies are doing all of the technology for the smart plugins for electric cars. So it's very interesting, and good luck with your farm. And thank you for getting up early in the morning in Australia.
We really appreciate your getting up so early. Frankly, I don't think any of the three of us would have done it. We're deeply, but you're younger and more vibrant than we are.
Well,
so
you could attribute youth, but you could say I've set a good example for you, and now you can do it as well.
Actually, I'm a newspaper man, and I've gotten up at every hour you can get up.
I actually think that
I'd like to just add a few thoughts. I think one, what is happening in Europe is going to make governments much more aware of the importance of their energy supply, and they're going to take a much greater interest, and probably an intrusive interest, in future energy supplies in a way that they sort of have forgotten about since 1973, 74, and 79, 80, the two big energy shocks. This third energy shock will bring a great deal of concentration to energy durability of supply. I also think that as always, there are things that are going to come along that we have no idea of. I think one of which is there's going to be a lot more attention to the externalities of renewables, use of land, disposition of windmills, solar panels, etc. at the end of their life, by battery recycling, that kind of thing. I think all of these are going to become into the come into the interview in the environmental concern. And there are a lot of questions to be asked there. And I think it's absolutely wonderful to have you on the program, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Gemma, thank you for being with us. Actually, Llewellyn and John, I think the reason Gemma is up is because she sleeps very little and she has 3 kids and she's a workaholic, which is a great quality to have as an entrepreneur. So, so thank
I
you,
try not
Gemma,
to
for
be a
being with us.
workaholic. I do work a lot, but yeah, I try and yeah, it's being a entrepreneur is a marathon, not a sprint, and you got to make sure you take care of all the other areas of your life as well to sustain the entrepreneurial project.
Yeah, well, I thank you again. I wish you great success. We love your company. We are, collaborating with you all, and we look forward to seeing the progress and helping in any way we can to accelerate this beautiful transformation to a 100% sustainable, clean environment.
Thank you so much. Bye, gentlemen.
Johnny, take us away.
Oh yeah, we take away with an old one. You could read my mind, love, what a tale my thoughts would tell, just like an old time movie about a ghost in a wishing well, in a castle dark, or a fortress strong with chains on my feet. You know that ghost is me, and I would never be set free as long as I'm a ghost that you can see. Okay.
Well done, John Butler. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
I'm
everybody.
gonna stop recording now.
Okay, take care. So are you